and welcome back to Market Like a Mother. We are wrapping up our second season here. We're kind of in the end zone, which is exciting. And something that we talk about a lot on this podcast is, of course, what it looks like to build something from the ground up from scratch. And the early days before the brand, before the team, and before you really have that real momentum, it honestly comes down to one thing, which is those first few clients of yours. So today we're going to be talking about the beginning stages of Radiant. I'm kind of putting on my interviewer hat again here today, and I'm going to be talking with Karen about how Radiant was actually growing in the early days, where those first few clients came from, and kind of the behind the scenes before Radiant became what we know it as today. So we're going to break down what worked, what didn't work, and lessons from those early clients that founders listening can apply now. So Karen, are you ready to dive into this today?
Yes, this is a fun and exciting topic. So I'm definitely looking forward to discussing.
I know, I feel like we're getting real nostalgic lately, like looking back on the early days.
Yeah, the good and bad.
Yeah, good and bad. So Karen, looking back to the early days of Radiant, you had dissolved your previous agency that you had with a partner. You're beginning Radiant by yourself. I want you to kind of think back to those first few clients you got and where they came from. You know, were they previous in your network? Were they referrals? Were they outbound? Kind of take us through that.
Yeah, so like you said, we actually did dissolve our agency and sort of split up the clients that we had in my previous agency. So I was fortunate enough to start over, having a couple of clients already. So those ones came from that agency, but then I was quickly getting referrals from other individuals in my network as well. So that was both from like outside of like my direct network in terms of, clients, which I did get referrals from existing clients, which is such a compliment, right? Like that is the best and biggest compliment is when an existing client refers another contact to you. Cause first of all, like significant built-in trust. They're already like, hey, I'm vouching for this agency that I'm working with right now, and I think you could benefit from them too. But I was getting, referrals from just contacts I'd met through other networking events that were colleagues or in similar areas. At that time, I was a HubSpot partner, and I was working with Infusionsoft, which became Keep later. They're based here in Chandler. And so I had met some other consultants and contacts through those networks and was getting referrals from those. And so that was definitely like a very effective yet slower way to grow the agency.
I feel like it's so great to hear that, you had referrals and people coming in from existing network, connections that you had made. But at what point did you realize or feel that you had to start doing outbound, and what did that transition look like for you from working with people you previously knew or referred to and had worked with at your previous agency versus going out to now find new clients?
Yeah, so I definitely think, when I started my agency, inbound was was just really starting to gain traction, and a lot of people still weren't familiar with it. It was something that I was offering as an agency. And so I definitely recognized very early that I wanted to make sure I was building a strong inbound channel and inbound agency, which means, I was creating content that people could find online and that people were still coming to me through my online visibility. And then coupled that with outbound. So attending events and kind of putting myself out there, and making sure I was meeting new people, getting, to attend things where prospective clients would be. So I started pretty much right out the gate with, with a blog, pushing out content that was relevant to my audience to start to generate some of that inbound. And then I started attending events and became part of some of the associations here so that I could get that exposure too. So it was really important, for a consistency in terms of new prospects coming through to have those additional channels above and beyond what was coming through referrals.
So looking at those additional channels that you kind of talked about, was there anything that you tried and didn't work? Maybe just to kind of give any founders out there listening, save them some time.
Yeah, I think, my thought would be, and I kind of saw this myself, is that until you have a really strong foundation and, have a good inbound kind of funnel or pipeline as well, you don't want to invest too early in paid advertising. And, the landscape was so different at that time because it was, 10 years ago. Now it's, everything changes on a daily basis, but it's very different now than it was 10 years ago, even in terms of, how search engine marketing and paid ads through, say, things like Google could influence your new business. So I would just be really mindful about how you're spending on ads, whether that's through social channels or through, search channels, and making sure that it's complementary to what is already driving some of that traction, and that it's something that you're not like putting all of your, eggs in the paid media basket, because it is definitely pricier, than the inbound leads or the referred leads, and it's harder to convert. So even if it is driving results in terms of new leads coming through, those leads are less likely to convert than ones coming from, referred channels or inbound channels. And so I do think, if I could have done something a little bit differently, I would have put more time, energy, and effort into like really building a strong referral program with my existing clients. And even though, I've always been a small agency, my goal is not to run a super high growth agency. We're concierge. We manage, a small number of clients because we really value that high touch concierge experience. There's always more chances to remind the people that are having a good experience with you that you are open to new clients. So I think there's probably more I could have done earlier on in the agency to generate referrals that way as well.
Okay, I think that is such good advice. I feel like anyone listening to it's always nice to kind of get those lessons learned from, people who are a little bit farther in their founder journey and more experienced. So I love that. I think that's such a good piece of advice to take away. I want to talk about something that's become like kind of a standard at Radiant. So we obviously have discovery calls, which we use to qualify our leads and kind of feel out best fit customers. And I feel like we've talked a lot on this podcast about, finding a client match that's a good fit. It goes both ways. Is this something that even in the early days that you were thinking about and kind of, qualifying these clients? Or is it something that you felt like you had to figure out over time through, learned experiences with your clients?
Yeah, you and I chatted for a second about this before we started this episode. So I'm definitely going to kick this question back to you too. But I think, you're always thinking of those ideal clients, but you're not necessarily saying no to the ones that aren't the ideal clients. And I definitely learned through trial and error what made for a good client for me. And that's changed over the years as well. So I think, just starting out and having, me and a couple of very part-time people on my team, I think that at that time, I was seeking out kind of the micro business, the one that was like maybe just a founder, very small team, low budget, that had maybe lower expectations. We were so green, we were so new, we were kind of alongside everyone learning all of the digital marketing offerings and channels and all that. So I think it was a good opportunity for me to work with businesses that we're just getting started in those areas as well. And then that grew and evolved as we became more sophisticated, our services advanced, we were, deepening our expertise in certain areas. And we started to look for clients a little bit further upstream that had a little bit more budget, that were willing to invest in slightly more complex campaigns and strategies. And so that changed. And then another like really important piece that I think has really helped to solidify the best fit clients for us is honestly our core values. I think understanding what we value as a team, as an agency, as individuals is very enlightening, because it really helps to make clear who is not a good fit from a value standpoint. So, we're kind, we're authentic, we're curious, we're impact focused, and we're human centric. So if we're mismatched in one of those values, it's very quickly clear that the relationship likely won't extend beyond the initial agreement. And we've had some clients that have not fit those values, and we've had to either like part ways, let go, or if it didn't come from us, then they probably felt that same kind of friction. And like I said, we would complete our initial agreement, and then we'd go our separate ways. But what do you feel like? Have you seen similar sort of experience? And I'm curious if you've taken on clients that you're like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking?
I feel like you don't know what doesn't work till it doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like, I think in the beginning, it's so easy to be ambitious and be like, I could work with anyone. And, it's great to be confident in your own abilities. But like you said, like there are so many things that could cause friction and could just, not be a match on values or expectations. Like there's so many things that might not align. And for me, I think it was so hard to almost accept that. Like in the early days of being, a founder of my own social media business, I wanted to say yes to anyone and everyone.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
in my head, more is more clients is better, more revenue, everything. And it definitely does lead to, moments of, there's certain clients that you just will never align with, and the expectations will never be met in their eyes, and vice versa. And being able to have the sense of like, okay, I'm gonna protect my peace, protect my reputation and what I've built, and just be able to part ways in like a civilized way is so important. But I almost think it's like a rite of passage as a founder. I'm like, you need to have that one
Hmm.
negative client experience to know what to look out for. Something I'm kind of curious for you is, are there, I don't want to say red flags, but are there indicators now that you could see, when you're in talks with potential clients that would indicate, oh, this might not work or be a fit, maybe so other people listening might kind of know what to look out for?
Yeah. So I have like a silly one that's probably, it's not like a rock solid indicator, but it is funny because over the years, I feel like I've noticed that the clients that ended up not being the best fit said this one key phrase, which was, you're the expert, so we'll let you do what you suggest kind of vibe.
Mm.
And it's funny because I feel like if they're stating that, then a lot of times, like subconsciously, they must be thinking, you're the expert, but I'm going to weigh in more than I need to and try to push things my way. I
Yep.
could be. So, I mean, I definitely, first, just to comment on what you shared too, is I was totally the same boat. And I think you're right. It's a rite of passage to take on all the work that comes your way as you get started in a business because you're trying to grow and it's a great opportunity to learn these things. And I think those mistakes are important building blocks in your future success. And I think that there's definitely a lot of key insights pulled from taking on those types of clients because I was going to push back a little bit on what you said is like you don't know until you know because I feel like now I do recognize very early on and I even like get sort of that gut feeling of like ooh I
Mhm.
don't know if this is going to work. But I don't know if I always had that, like to your point, like if that's a learned thing that my gut has learned over the time, over working with dozens, if not now hundreds of clients. But I think that's something to be really tuned into is like sometimes our body knows better than our mind because we're so ambitious and motivated and excited about possibilities and opportunities. So like definitely tuning into like what your gut is telling you because maybe there's some yellow, orange, red flags that your body is recognizing that's creating some like tension or kind of that foreboding that's like what they just said, I've heard this before, or like what they're expecting, like while I feel ambitious and like we can do that, like it's just not totally what we normally do. It's maybe a little bit misaligned. Or again, those core values. If there's some things that are off with those values, then that's that's key. That definitely says a lot about whether or not they're going to be a good fit.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think too, again, the more you experience it and work with these clients and, kind of figure out what a best fit client for you looks like, it is easier to kind of get that gut feeling and recognize those things in advance. I know you shared a little bit about kind of, the radiant values and in how we find clients that align, but I want to kind of go from, the early days to now. How has what you think is a best fit client changed, as Radiant has evolved, as user evolved now with over 10 years in business? How has that changed from, the early days to now?
Yeah, I definitely think that like I mentioned, that our clients have become a little bit more sophisticated. So,
Mhm.
in the past where we might be doing some very basic sort of work for our clients, we are now offering much more integrated solutions that cover a lot of channels, that cover, different, include a different tool set. And so looking to work with clients that have, possibly have a larger team, that have a dedicated internal marketing resource like a CMO, that aren't just being run, exclusively by the founder. And that's not to say we don't have, founder led and very, founder involved clients. I think that the clients that we're finding are most aligned are the ones that, we have an advocate on the client side that's dedicated to supporting the campaigns that we have in place. So that's definitely something. I think too, one of the things that shifted, and this shifted earlier on when I, first started with Radiant, was working with clients that did have high growth goals. So, initially we were working with more kind of single practice medical facilities, whether that was physical therapy or, medical or wound or whatever the subspecialty it was within the health and wellness space. A lot of our focus has grown and evolved into like high impact digital services. So clients that are looking to really grow their impact and their revenue through digital channels. So that's been, another kind of area that's shifted over the years.
And so I think it's interesting to like look back kind of on how Radiant started and how things have evolved from then until now. For founders who are in that early stage right now that we keep referring back to and might be trying to land their first few clients, is there anything specifically that you would tell them to focus on? I know you talked a little bit about the referral program that, you wish you had implemented earlier, but even just in qualifying their, potential clients, is there anything you'd specifically tell them to, really put that time and energy into?
Yeah. And first, it's okay to say no, right?
Yeah.
Like if you feel like this is going to be more of a time suck, like low profit margin, not a good fit from a value standpoint, then it is okay to say no. And I think, Lauren, you and I chatted about this on one of our previous episodes. That abundance mindset is huge in being able to do that. Like if you have a scarcity mindset and you're like, man, if I say no to this client, even though they don't seem like a great client, we don't mesh well for these reasons, like then I'm not going to have any business and I'm not going to grow. Like that mindset is what's going to keep you from saying no to the wrong opportunities that are, could be detrimental to your business. If you take on something that's, that really doesn't work well, then all of your energy and focus is going to go into like maintaining this bad client relationship or bad customer relationship when you could be focused on, growing your business. So definitely, that it's okay to say no. And maybe two is, when there are situations that feel like they're slightly misaligned, is maybe offering, a scaled down version or more of kind of like a date before you get married version that allows you to kind of vet and ensure, like, is this a good fit? Like, so maybe it's kind of questionable. There might be a yellow flag or two, but it's not like glaring red flag, not a good fit. So we'll do that too, where we do like more of a short-term engagement or something that isn't as, as long-term or as robust. And we're focused more exclusively on like maybe one smaller objective. And that gives us a chance to see like, is this a good relationship? Can we do, what they're looking to, can we help them achieve what they're looking to achieve? And then after that shorter period of time, you can reassess and decide. And maybe one or both of you are like this doesn't feel like exactly what I was hoping for, like let's part ways. So I think those are kind of key things to be thinking about as you look to take on new clients.
I love that. It almost is like a try before you buy. Like I think of it as like a trial run, with the client of, is this going to work? Are we going to be able to work together and do what we need to do? And I also wanted to kind of go back to the first thing you said, because a phrase that I keep seeing on social media, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't know who said it first at this point, but no is a complete sentence. That's like, I'm seeing that everywhere. And I'm like, sometimes, like you said, if you have that gut feeling, like you don't always need to overly justify it and to overly explain. But being able to say no is so important as a founder. So I think that's a really important takeaway too. As we're starting to wrap up here, a big thing I wanted to look at too was you mentioned a few times now how, our clients have gotten to be these more sophisticated businesses. We're a little more involved, and, our services look different than when Radiant first began now. But I wanted to ask if there were any lessons that you took from your early clients that kind of shape how Radiant runs and functions now today in terms of services and onboarding. Are there any key things you could remember that you're like, wow, we do things this way now because of, an experience you had early on with a client?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not thinking of anything specific. I think just
Hmm.
like really those day-to-day interactions with clients and like taking the good and the bad from each of those relationships has really refined and shaped our processes. I think the discovery kind of component of our offerings is not it's not well it's not new. It wasn't something that I started with out the gate, and I definitely think it's a really great way to start our work with our clients, and something that I learned, probably from a few of the first early day clients where we wanted to dive straight into like the tactical kind of implementation side without having all of the data and research and insights that we needed to be effective. So that's a big one where, we've now have like the initial phase of our agreement typically includes what we call our discovery phase, which is really that research and kind of strategy building phase that gives us the behind the scenes look from their customers' perspective, from their years in the business, and helps us really refine and shape a powerful strategy for them so that we can be as effective as possible.
I love that. And I think it's fun too to look at um, just the work now versus the work in the early days too. I think for you, I'm sure it's really nice to be able to look back and kind of think how much more Radiant could offer now, and how much more streamlined our processes are compared to those early days. So I think it is kind of cool to think that those first few clients kind of set the precedent for
Yeah.
what we offer now, for
Well,
sure.
and I love that, Lauren, and you just made me think of another thing I want to share too, because I think as a solopreneur just getting started, a lot of times we have questions about the value that we're bringing to the table, and I think from a pricing perspective, we could be really prohibitive with ourselves because at least this is I shouldn't speak for all, I guess, but for me that was definitely an early day challenge. Is I was giving a lot and not charging what it was worth. And I think,
Yeah.
I definitely learned over the years like how much value I was bringing to clients, and with that learning was able to adjust and increase and adapt my pricing to be more reflective of that value. So that's another kind of really key piece that I think, having networks and being involved with other similar types of businesses, or having entrepreneurs in the same space and friends that you can collaborate with in that way and like understand other pricing structures and things is super important, because it gives you a wider perspective and lens on maybe what you should be charging as well. Because I think as a solopreneur, your value oftentimes of your services is tied back to like you as a person, which it should not be.
Yes.
And you should be able to separate that out. But it's like something that might take time and learning and seeing like the feedback you're getting from clients and how much value, or even like literally like how much money you're bringing into their business, and you're charging them, a fraction of that. So that's definitely key learning and something for new founders to be thinking about.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I almost think too there's like a confidence too that comes with it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think back to just how I handled my first few clients as a solopreneur too, and just being able to now have the confidence after having those first early clients to like ask for what I'm worth, you know what I mean, and to be able to
Mm-hmm.
speak up and to push back, I think is so important too. So I almost think your early clients are a way to, I don't want to say like practice, but it does help kind of combat some of that imposter syndrome and get your confidence going. So, as you gain more clients and you're getting more evolved, you could really feel able to, push back, ask for more, and, really make sure that you're feeling that the rate you're getting paid is, comparable to the work that you're doing and the value you're providing for them.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up here, I just wanted to talk about something super quick. We are in real time as we're recording this, getting ready to go on our team trip this week, which is
Yay!
so exciting. So this is our last kind of virtual episode that you'll have this season, and we are going to do some really special things this week on the team trip and have some more exciting podcast content coming your way, but with us actually being together in person. So
So excited.
really excited, just so excited. I mean, spoiler alert, they're going to be the best episodes ever. So make sure
Oh my
you
gosh,
tune into
setting
those.
some high expectations here.
Yes. Yeah, you will not want to miss that. So just wanted to share that because we're super excited. And the next few episodes that will be coming out after the time you listen to this one are going to be some good ones and a little different. So very excited for that. As always, you can check out the Radiant website to learn how we help brands grow with intentions. We are on social. We are on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and we are on YouTube. If you love today's episode, you can stream it on Apple or Spotify. And we do always have a video version of our podcast where you could see our lovely smiling faces on YouTube as well. Thank you for hanging out with us, and we'll see you in person soon. Until next time, stay radiant.
Stay radiant.